Welcome to episode 50 of the IT Fundamentals Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Haupt, and let's get rolling today on talking about file extensions and other forms of exploring the application. So here we roll. Welcome to IT Fundamentals Training Series. You are in episode 55 and 0. That's a huge milestone, to be honest with you. I know I've said it a couple of times before. It's like, oh, we're at the big this or the big that, but 50 in podcasting is a huge milestone. So thank you for joining us. Let's throw the balloons out. Yay! But here we go. So what we're going to talk about today are diving a little bit deeper on applications and exploring the applications a little bit. First thing we want to dive into is on page 277 of the book. If you're with us and you actually have the book in front of you, we're going to talk about file extensions, okay? Now, there's a number of different file extensions that the book wants you to know about. Of course, I'm running off of a Windows operating system, so we're going to be looking specifically at that. But if you look at table 5.1, these are the common executable file extensions that you need to be looking at from the executable space, meaning that that's what starts up a program or a software piece. Now, before we dive into those common executable functions, the book talks about other types of executable or types of extensions that are on documents or things along those lines. So if you have a .exe, which is this right here, that is going to execute a program. So this is the help pane.exe, and whenever I click on that, what's going to happen is over on another window is the help pane actually starts up. The PowerShell product actually fires up, and here's what the PowerShell product looks like once it fires up. It allows me to do what we call command line interface, or CLI, into the back end of Windows. So this allows me, you know how we've talked about before, the mouse is actually issuing commands. Like when you double click, when I double clicked on that PowerShell.exe, what happened was it actually executed a series of commands in that executed, that started a computer. And this is actually what it looks like here. If I did a right click and chose properties in order to open this up, this is what that executable command looks like, of what happens when I double click on the mouse. And then what the result of that is this opening up. Now, what I can then do is I can start typing in commands, such as maybe I could type in let's see, ipconfig, and hit enter. And what that does is that shows me all the IP configurations that are going on my computer, so I can actually see the IP address, the subnet mask, default gateway, things along those lines. Now that's that network stuff are things that we'll talk about a little bit later on, but you can see that. Now, another thing with these commands is you can actually do what they call extensions or add-ons. If you were to do, and I just did it right here, if you did ipconfig and then a slash with a question mark, it would list to you all the different options that you had that you can utilize. So right here, you can see the options: question mark, display the help message; all, display full configuration information. So if I typed in ipconfig / all, it's going to show me way more information that I initially wanted to know about my computer. And you know, it's very important that you actually type it correctly. It didn't understand what ipconfig. See, that's the problem with that typing things in. So there you go. It gives me a whole bunch of additional information about my IP configuration. All right, so that's just an example of PowerShell right there. MSI. These are installation packages, and I kind of showed you this earlier by launching on a previous episode of launching this Topaz Photo AI MSI program. This is where it will then call out to the what's called MSI exec.exe. So what it will do is it will call out one of these executive or execute, I should say, programs that will then start installing the software that's out there. The .app is a Mac OS version of the .exe, so keep that in mind. And .scexe is the self-extracting firmware updates for HP specific products and on Linux machines. Now, why they put this in here as something to remember and deal with when it's very specific to one manufacturer, and then even that, or actually it's specific to Linux and then even that one manufacturer, I don't know, but just kind of remember that. And the way I remember it is SC is something I used to deal with, SCO Unix, SC, so Southern California Operating System is SCO. So you can remember SC as Southern California EXE, and you just remember that it's related to HP. Now, the other one that's listed here is a batch file, a BAT, and those are some fun ones that you can do. You could actually create some batch files on your own inside of a notepad or a type of just command line editor. So I'd recommend that one of the things you should do is perhaps take a look at some batch files that will execute the PowerShell, for example, that will run ipconfig for you, and you can play around with that, and that's just a little bit of programming. So some of the other things you need to look at, if we wanted to launch, for example, Microsoft Word, we could launch that as an exe, but you'll notice that all the Word files have this .docx extension after it. So every single one of the Word documents will either have a .doc or .docx, and is typically .docx in modern format. And what that does is that will then execute the Microsoft Word product right here and allow you to operate within it. So in a similar fashion, anything used with Microsoft Excel is .xlsx, and so on and so forth. Now we're going to talk about some of the graphical extensions in a few moments, and those are JPEG, GIF, and so on and so forth. We'll get to that in just a moment as we move through this chapter. All right, so that's just a little bit of a view, if you will, of the different file type extensions that you can work with. The one that's most dangerous is .exe, because that one can execute malware and things like that on your computer. So just kind of keep that in mind. One of the things that you can also do is associate these file extensions, or I'm sorry, yeah, these files and their extensions with certain types of applications. So to do that, if you were to type in default apps from the search bar and execute default apps, as I'm showing you here, you can define by selecting one of these what kind of applications or what kind of extensions are utilized for each of the different kinds of apps. So there we go, default apps. All right, so for example, we're looking at Adobe Acrobat, and it will say the file types or link types that can be opened with Adobe Acrobat. So most people will automatically associate .pdf with Adobe Acrobat, and it's a little bit more than that. You can see there's the .aaui, .bpdx, and so on and so forth. And so you can associate these with different types of applications in doing that. Now, one of the ones that a lot of folks don't realize is that like with Google Chrome here, first of all, you can go inside of here and set a particular type of application as the default. And if you look at default apps and then you'll work your way through the different file types, like all HTML files or HTML files in my computer are going to open with Google Chrome, and I can change this very easily by selecting the little pop-out window option on the right hand side and saying, okay, which app do I want to use? And so right now I'm using Google Chrome, but if I wanted to use Microsoft Edge, I can select that and that would automatically change that. For a JPEG, for example, I may want to open all JPEGs with Adobe Photoshop so I can play with them in there. All .docx. Maybe I want to open that with Notepad instead, or maybe I want to open all text.txt files with Word instead of Notepad. And I can make that change by simply selecting, and I'm not going to do that here because it will change it. I would select the tool and then set default button at the bottom of that, and that would make a change here. So we are going to make that change here where I have nothing assigned. So like this .shtml, we're going to pop that out and we're going to set Google Chrome as the .shtml viewer for that. So I selected Google Chrome and now I'm setting default, and you see that right there, that's the change. The .svg, I want that to be Chrome and not Edge. So I select Chrome and set default on that. And I could go down that through many of these different file types and do that. And that's under default apps. That's figure 5.14 on page 278 if you want to play with that, and 5.15 as well. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about productivity software next. And in particular, most people will interact, especially if you're in school or whatnot, you're going to interact with what's called word processing software. Now, there's multiple word processing software out there, but to be honest with you, the most common word processing software is what you see on your screen right here, and that's Microsoft Word. This is a paid-for product, although in an educational type of institution or situation, you may actually be able to get a free copy of it for the period of time that you're enrolled in school. Another option for that's actually fairly popular these days is also Google Docs, because again, that actually comes free with your Gmail, with your Gmail options, which is a free product as well. And just keep in mind that anytime you have a free product out there, like a G something, you are actually the product, which means they're mining information about you that's out there. So inside of Google, instead of a Microsoft Word, you would select Google Docs, and that would bring up a very similar window where in this, just like Word, you could sit there and type messages and information documents. You can make these essentially books if you decide to. So I think most everybody's probably familiar with that word processing software, but do keep in mind that there's multiple extensions that are associated with the word processing software. There's .txt, which is just a basic text document. There are a couple of text editors out there. There's one called Notepad that comes native with Windows. And it looks like this right here. It's just a simple text. There's very basic type of functions here. There's hardly anything in here to change fonts and things along that line. There is a free product that that I like quite a bit. And again, remember, free means they're probably getting something out of you as a result of that. But that's called Notepad++. I showed you that earlier when we looked at the PowerShell.exe here. Here's a just something that I typed in here, again, just as straight text. And this one has a little bit more functionality than Notepad itself. That's why they call it Notepad++, the plus meaning it's got a couple extra features on it. But that's a very useful function, as a product as well for you to utilize. So that deals with TXT files. There's another format called rich text format. And it's also a pretty basic document file format, and it's compatible with Microsoft Office and Google Documents. All right, so I've kind of gone through the word processing software here. I'm going to just dive into very quickly another the Microsoft Excel type of product. This is for numerical type of functions. A lot of spreadsheets are done on here in regards to mathematical equations. So what you could do in here, for example, is type in a couple of numbers and this is just a very basic example. Highlight them, and then choose the auto sum, and it will do math. So there's a lot of functionality that's numeric related that is inside of Microsoft Excel. If you're doing something with numbers, spreadsheets, things along those lines, where you're trying to add things up, trying to divide, multiply, this is the product for you. There are different types of products that are out there that can be utilized. You know, Google Sheets is the Google version of this. There's also a number of different kinds of products like Quattro Pro, and I'm trying to remember exactly what the Mac version of this is, but I haven't used that one in years. Excel is the business standard and is worth you getting used to and knowing. Now, another thing is presentation software. That's where we're putting together presentations for, that will include graphics, things where we'll be presenting um, inside of a business presentation, or perhaps in front of a crowd. A preacher on a Sunday morning might be doing that. So here's an example of a presentation I put together for a conference I did last week. And this is just my bio. You see, we kind of snazz it up a little bit, put a little picture in there, talking about who I am, and then we can kind of move through. And this is a section here called the notes section, where you can put in all your notes that are related to what you want to speak about in regards to that piece of the presentation. And that's where down here on the bottom, you got this notes where you can hide or have that presented for you. The Mac OS version of this is Keynote, and the Google version of this is, I should have it up in front of me. Yeah, here it is. The Google version of this is called Slides. All right. So those are some key pieces of productivity software. Of course, I think you're probably all familiar with Gmail or Microsoft Outlook. I'm not going to go into that, but these are some pieces that you can look at. The book also goes into visual diagramming software, which you can do inside of PowerPoint. You could also do it inside of a product from Microsoft called Visio, which I don't have installed on here. This is where you can do things like org charts and things along those lines. Collaboration software is typically what you get with the email programs like Gmail or Outlook. I think we're all familiar with those types of things. Instant messaging software, again, I think in modern day times, we're very familiar with those. In the business world, we use Teams, Zoom, Slack, things along those lines. There's also FaceTime, and Trillian and Miranda and Digsby. Things, honestly, some of these things I've never even heard of. So those are some things to take a look at. I would recommend that you continue to read in the book the other pieces on there. One of them that they do spend some time on that's absolutely essential to operating any business or even non-business type of function nowadays is you have got to have an antivirus or anti-malware product on your computer. Okay, and that's where they start talking about that in page 294 and following. The antivirus product, there's many different types of products out there. Personally, I'm a fan of the Trend Micro maximum security product. This product has worked well for me, but they all operate essentially the same thing. What you could do is you can set it up where you install it locally on your computer, and then you define where your data is located on your computer, and you hit scan. And what it will do is it will scan based upon what they call signatures that are behind the product, looking for the bad guys, looking for identifiers that could be potential threats on the computer. Now, I will tell you that most of these products are going to pick up things. I'd be surprised if this scan that we're running right here on the computer doesn't pick up something on my computer, because they will pick up what they call PUPs, which are simply web cookies and things like that may not be malware itself, but it might be collecting information, which is what cookies do, about your operations, your functions on your computer. And these are kind of essential pieces to the the, the operation of a website and the browser itself. So I'm not worried about things like PUPs typically, but what I am worried about is it's going to tell me if there's any other type of functioning, anything else that's going on this computer. They also do privacy checks where you could turn on privacy scanners and things along those lines. You can hide your credit cards inside of there. Looking for data theft prevention. Data theft prevention, I don't have it turned on because this is where you would type in like sequences, not actual credit card numbers, but sequences, social security number sequences, things like that. I have other tools that handle that, but I also, I do have turned on for social network protection. So, those idiots out there that are trying to hijack and take over your Facebook page, this will protect against that as well. So there's a lot of different functions that that can occur with inside of these products. Here's one right here. Obviously, you don't want to turn it on at this given moment, but Secure Erase will allow you to erase any types of you know files. For example, after you delete a file on your computer that may contain sensitive information, you remember we talked about on the hard drive segment, it would actually continue to reside on your hard drive. Well, Secure Erase will make sure that that's actually gone. A password manager, I use a different password manager, but these are very important and very good, useful tools. You can include on maximum security, you can include your family and be able to manage it from your family perspective. Now, so after my scan run, this is what my results were, and I actually found no threats, or they found no threats in the system. There were over 1,000 files that were scanned looking for that. We can take a look at some of the details here, and yeah, nothing there to worry about. And honestly, that's because I run this thing and I maintain it like a couple of times a day because of what I do. I'm always looking for something, and these are good. The optimization levels is actually not security related, but it's telling me where there's things running inside of my computer that probably shouldn't be running, such as unpatched system, startup time issues, the disk space that's being utilized that shouldn't be utilized, things along those lines. So that's a piece of anti-malware. They use, in the book, they use Norton Internet Security. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a fan of Norton or McAfee because what they're called what I call bloatware. They have so many different pieces on them that they just bog the computer down. So another important piece of software that you have, or you should have on your computer, is the Windows Firewall, or a firewall that Windows Firewall will block any types, or you can configure it to block any types of attack patterns and things like that that are coming into your computer. And we can get into, and we'll get into the firewalls more during the network segment. But bottom line is you can write, like go into advanced settings, for example, and you can write a rule, what's called an inbound or an outbound rule, that will actually allow or disallow certain types of things. So you can see here, I'm allowing my Elgato camera to be able to speak to my computer, but these iMagination pieces, I've actually declined to and turn them off. My outbound rules, if I wanted to, I could say, hey, I don't want any sort of Spotify music going out. And this will just gives me a visual representation of what I'm allowing and what I'm not allowing on my computer that will help protect it from the bad guys that are out there. All right, the final thing that we want to look at is regarding the file extensions for file compression formats. Okay, and if you look at if you start looking on page 299 and then you flip over to 300, so there's a product out there I want you to download and play with called 7-Zip. And if you're familiar with WinZip, or Windows itself has a zip product in it, the whole concept of zip is that it compresses the files into a package that then allows you to transfer it, move it around, or even archive it. And there's multiple different kinds of file compression formats that are out there. The .zip is the one that's run and developed by PKWare. There's ISO, which are image files that are frequently found by downloading large files like the entire Windows operating system, for example. 7Z is for the 7-zip product, and so on and so forth. All right, so we're going to wrap it up there for today, and this is episode 50. So when we come back to 51, we're going to take a look at PDF viewers and creators. We're going to actually go through my Adobe Acrobat and get a look at some of the features inside of Adobe Acrobat that people are probably not familiar with. And we're going to dive into web browsers a little bit. So again, we're going to start showing, like we did here, we're going to start showing you some of these things on the screen instead of just talking about it. And I hope you're looking forward to coming back to do that. So again, if you need to get a hold of me, MHOUPT at Gmail, or I'm sorry, at commonsensesecurity.net. So again, MHOUPT at commonsensesecurity.net. Happy to speak to you there. Get a hold of me and look forward to talking to you. Thanks much.